One sentence made John McEnroe immortal to people who had never picked up a tennis racket. "You cannot be serious." It was not just a complaint, it was a detonation. A left-handed genius standing on the most proper lawn in tennis, staring at an official as if the entire sport had lost its mind. That moment did something strange. It confirmed everything his critics hated about him and everything his fans could not stop watching. Because McEnroe was never only a tennis player with a temper, he was a contradiction in motion. His hands were delicate enough to make the ball look weightless. His mouth was sharp enough to turn a match into courtroom drama. He could play a volley like a whisper, then argue a line call like a street fight. And by the end of his prime, the question was not simply whether John McEnroe was brilliant. That part was obvious. The real question was more uncomfortable. Did the anger damage the genius, or was it part of the machine? To understand why McEnroe became both adored and despised, you have to start with the sport he entered. Tennis, especially at Wimbledon, was built on ritual. White clothes, quiet crowds, polite applause. Players were expected to suffer injustice with a tight smile. A bad call was supposed to be accepted, not prosecuted. You might raise an eyebrow. You might ask a question, but you did not turn the court into a stage. Then McEnroe arrived, and the stage caught fire. He did not look like a traditional tennis champion. He was wiry, restless, almost twitching with energy. His service motion was unusual. His body seemed to coil sideways, then release at the last possible moment. His movement was not always graceful in the classical sense, but his timing was outrageous. He could take the ball early. He could knife a volley into a corner with almost no swing. He could make a difficult shot look casual, then make an easy conversation look impossible. He was a New Yorker in a sport that often preferred understatement. He brought impatience, sarcasm, and nerve. He also brought a level of touch that seemed almost unfair. This is why the McEnroe story is not a simple story about bad behavior. If he had only shouted, he would have been a footnote. If he had only won, he would have been admired. But he shouted while winning, and he won while looking like he might explode at any second. That combination made him impossible to ignore. By the late 1970s and early 1980s, men's tennis was already full of strong personalities. Jimmy Connors played with a street fighter's edge. Bjorn Borg played with a cold calm that bordered on myth. Yvonne Lendl brought discipline and power. Against them, McEnroe became something different, the artist who could not leave the referee alone. His rise was fast. As a teenager, he made a deep run at Wimbledon, signaling that he was not just talented, but dangerous. Soon, he was challenging and beating the best players in the world. He was especially effective on fast courts, where his serve and volley game could suffocate opponents. He did not give them time to breathe. Serve, charge, cut off the angle, finish at the net. The point could be over before the crowd settled into its seats. But the strange part was that his tennis was often calmer than his behavior. Watch McEnroe at the net, and you see control. His racket face was precise. His hands absorbed pace. He did not need huge swings because he understood angles and weight. He seemed to know where the ball wanted to go before it arrived. That kind of talent usually suggests serenity. With McEnroe, it came wrapped in fury, and the fury had a pattern. A line call would go against him. He would freeze. Then he would walk toward the chair umpire or stare down a linesperson. His voice would rise. The argument would become its own contest. He was not just saying, "I disagree." He was saying, "Your error is an insult to reality." To some viewers, this was unbearable. Tennis had rules. Officials had authority. Players were not supposed to humiliate them in public. McEnroe looked spoiled, rude, disrespectful. To others, he was saying what everyone else was too afraid to say. If a call looked wrong, why pretend? If the stakes were enormous, why act like nothing happened? Fans who disliked tennis manners found McEnroe thrilling because he broke the script. He made the hidden emotion visible. That split reaction would define him. The most famous eruption came at Wimbledon in 1981. McEnroe was facing Tom Gullickson when a serve was called out. McEnroe believed it was in. What followed became one of the most replayed outbursts in sports history. "You cannot be serious," he repeated it, challenged the call, and attacked the competence of the officials. The exact rhythm of the rant matters less than what it represented. At Wimbledon, the temple of restraint, McEnroe refused restraint. He made disbelief sound like an accusation. The phrase became larger than the moment. It became a shorthand for him. It became a title, a punchline, a brand, and eventually part of his own public identity. Many athletes are remembered for a shot. McEnroe is remembered for a sentence. But that same Wimbledon tells you why the story is more complicated. In 1981, the controversy did not stop him from winning the tournament. He defeated Bjorn Borg in the final, ending Borg's remarkable run at Wimbledon. The man who offended the etiquette of the place also conquered it. That is the core of the McEnroe paradox. His behavior seemed like a collapse, but his results often suggested total competitive clarity. He could argue, rage, complain, and still play breathtaking tennis. So, was it a weakness or was it fuel? The easy answer is that anger helped him. It gave him energy. It intimidated officials. It disrupted opponents. It turned the match into a storm, and McEnroe knew how to play inside the storm. But the easy answer is not enough. Anger also cost him. It damaged his reputation. It attracted penalties. It sometimes pulled focus away from his tennis. It made every close call dangerous because a normal point could become a crisis. Opponents could wait for the emotional surge and hope it would become self-destruction. McEnroe's greatest rivals understood this. Borg, calm and silent, became the perfect contrast. Connors could match his edge and feed off conflict. Lendl, disciplined and relentless, became the kind of opponent who could expose any emotional leak. Against each of them, McEnroe was not only playing tennis, he was wrestling with himself, and that internal fight became part of the entertainment. In the early 1980s, McEnroe was everywhere. He won major titles. He helped the United States in Davis Cup. He was a dominant doubles player as well as a singles star, which matters because doubles showed another side of his genius. At the net, in quick exchanges, in instinctive reactions, his game looked almost custom-built for doubles. He had a rare ability to read space. He did not just hit the ball, he rearranged the court. Yet the more he won, the more his behavior became part of the price of admission. People did not watch McEnroe only to see who won. They watched to see what might happen. A bad bounce, a late call, a warning from the umpire, a crowd reaction. Any of these could become the spark. This is where McEnroe changed the relationship between tennis and television. Television loves conflict. It loves close-ups, facial expressions, arguments, and moments that can be replayed. A silent champion can be great, but a furious champion gives cameras something else: drama between points. McEnroe's explosions made the invisible pressure of elite tennis visible. You could see the cost of perfection. You could see how thin the line was between control and chaos. A match involving McEnroe had a second scoreboard, the score in games and sets, and the temperature of his temper. That made him compelling, but it also created a trap. Once the public expects outrage, outrage becomes part of the show. If McEnroe argued, critics said he was proving them right. If he stayed calm, people waited for the eruption. His image became so powerful that it sometimes swallowed his actual play. And that is unfair because his actual play was extraordinary. McEnroe won 7 Grand Slam singles titles, 3 at Wimbledon and 4 at the US Open. He also became one of the great doubles players of his era, with major doubles success that reinforced his all-court intelligence. His 1984 season is often described as one of the finest in men's tennis. He won the vast majority of his matches that year, losing only a handful, and he played at a level that many fans and analysts still rank among the highest peaks in the sport. That season matters because it shows the version of McEnroe that gets hidden behind the shouting. When he was at his best, he did not need rage to look intense. His tennis itself was pressure. He took time away from opponents. He attacked second serves. He moved forward with confidence. He could redirect pace, as if borrowing an opponent's power and returning it with interest. His serve was not the fastest, but it was deceptive. His left-handed angle opened the court. His volleying made passing shots feel desperate. He could drop the ball short, punch it deep, or carve it away. He turned the net into a place of control, not risk. In an era before today's baseline-heavy style, this was devastating. Players had less time, rackets were different, and the grass courts played faster than they do now. McEnroe's game was built for that world. He was not trying to overpower everyone. He was trying to rush them into the wrong answer. And yet, even during his most brilliant periods, the controversies kept following him. He argued with chair umpires. He argued with linespeople. He argued with tournament authorities. He argued so often that the arguments became part of his legend. Some of the disputes were about genuine frustration with calls. Some appeared to be tactical, or at least useful to his rhythm. Some simply looked like a man unable or unwilling to contain himself. The most dramatic consequence came years later at the Australian Open, when McEnroe was defaulted from a match after a series of code violations. Accounts of the exact sequence focus on escalating penalties and verbal misconduct under the tournament's rules. The important point is simple. The sport eventually showed that even a superstar could be removed from a match if the line was crossed. That default became another permanent marker in his story. It was not as famous as, "You cannot be serious," but it carried a different meaning. The Wimbledon outburst made him iconic. The default showed the limit. By then, tennis had changed. The rules around player conduct had become clearer and stricter. The sport could not rely only on tradition and embarrassment. It needed enforcement. McEnroe's behavior was one reason the conversation around conduct became impossible to ignore. But there is a danger in telling this story as if McEnroe alone created confrontation in tennis. He did not. Tennis has always had disputes. Players have always felt wronged by calls. The difference was visibility, frequency, and personality. McEnroe's timing was perfect for controversy. He was a major champion in the television age, with a face and voice made for replay. He did not mutter complaints into the air. He delivered them like a performance. That performance made him money, attention, enemies, and fans. It also created a strange moral problem for spectators. Many people who condemned his behavior still watched. Many who called him disrespectful still remembered his matches more vividly than quieter ones. He was bad for decorum, but good for attention. He broke the rules of politeness, but he made the sport feel alive to viewers who might otherwise have found it too controlled. This is why the phrase "most hated and most loved" fits him better than it fits many athletes. With McEnroe, those reactions were not separate. They came from the same source. The same honesty that fans loved looked like arrogance to critics. The same refusal to accept a bad call looked like bullying to officials. The same emotional intensity that made him dangerous as a competitor made him exhausting as a presence. He forced everyone to choose what they valued more: grace or truth, order or emotion, silence or spectacle. Of course, that framing is too clean. McEnroe was not simply truth against order. He was often wrong, or at least not as obviously right as he believed. In tennis, line calls can be brutally close. Before modern electronic review became common, officials had to make instant decisions with human eyes. Players saw the ball from their own angle, under pressure, with adrenaline flooding the body. Certainty was often an illusion, but McEnroe's certainty was volcanic. He could not treat a disputed call as uncertain. To him, in that moment, it could feel like an offense against logic itself. That is why "you cannot be serious" worked so well. It was not just anger, it was disbelief at the idea that anyone could see the world differently. That made him fascinating, because elite sport is full of people who need extreme certainty. Champions often survive by believing completely in their own reading of the moment. Doubt is expensive. McEnroe's gift may have required that certainty. His problem was that he carried it into arguments where certainty did not always belong. And yet, there is another layer. McEnroe's rage was loud, but his tennis was subtle. This contrast made him unlike the stereotype of the angry athlete. He did not smash his way through opponents with brute force. He painted, he improvised, he solved problems quickly. His hands were almost musical. The ball left his racket with angles and spins that made opponents look late, even when they were moving well. So viewers saw a man who could create beauty and ugliness within the same minute. That is why his matches still have a charge. You are not just watching old tennis. You are watching two incompatible forces inside one person: control and rebellion. The Borg rivalry sharpened that contrast. Borg looked like ice. McEnroe looked like sparks. Their Wimbledon finals became symbolic because the tennis was excellent and the personalities were so different. Borg's calm made McEnroe look wilder. McEnroe's volatility made Borg look almost supernatural. Each man made the other more dramatic. Against Connors, the tension had a different flavor. Connors was also combative, also intense, also willing to turn a match into a confrontation. Those matches could feel personal, even when they were simply competitive. There was less contrast and more collision. Against Lendl, McEnroe faced a player whose physical discipline and baseline power pointed toward the future of tennis. Lendl was not there to entertain the storm. He was there to build pressure point by point. As the sport evolved, McEnroe's style and temperament both faced new tests. This is one reason his dominance did not last as long as some other legends. His peak was brilliant, but the game was changing. Training methods improved, power increased, baseline play became more punishing. Younger players became stronger and more professional in a modern sense. McEnroe remained dangerous, but the margins tightened. And when margins tighten, emotional control becomes even more valuable. Still, reducing his later decline to temperament would be too simple. Tennis careers are shaped by bodies, surfaces, equipment, rivals, motivation, and timing. McEnroe had already achieved enormous success. The sport around him shifted. Other players rose. No single explanation captures it all. What remains clear is that his public identity became inseparable from conflict. That could have destroyed his legacy. For some athletes, scandal overwhelms achievement. But McEnroe did something unusual after his playing prime. He turned the very qualities that made him controversial into a second career. As a commentator, his bluntness became an asset. The same sharp eye that once attacked officials could now explain points to viewers. The same unwillingness to speak in polite cliches made him valuable on television. He could be funny, cutting, insightful, and honest. Fans who once booed him could listen to him analyze matches and realize something important. Behind the tantrums was a serious tennis mind. That is a major part of the McEnroe transformation. Time softened the anger into character. The outbursts became stories. The catchphrase became nostalgia. The villain became a voice of the sport. But nostalgia can also distort. It can make bad behavior seem harmless because it happened long ago. It can turn intimidation into comedy. It can make officials look like props in the legend of a genius. That is not entirely fair either. The people on the other side of McEnroe's rants were doing difficult jobs under pressure. They did not have slow-motion replay in their eyes. They were part of the match, but they were not supposed to become targets. So the honest takeaway is not that McEnroe was right to behave that way. It is not that his tantrums should be copied. In the modern game, with stricter rules, more cameras, and electronic systems, a player trying to build a career on that style of confrontation would pay a heavy price. The better takeaway is that McEnroe exposed something real about sport. Competition is not only technical, it is emotional. The best players do not just manage shots, they manage injustice, pressure, ego, fear, and frustration. Most champions hide that battle. McEnroe put it on the scoreboard. That made him messy. It also made him unforgettable. And his legacy forces a question that still matters in tennis today. What do we want from athletes? Do we want perfect manners, even if they hide the truth of competition? Do we want raw emotion, even when it crosses a line? Do we forgive genius more easily because it entertains us? And if we do, what does that say about us? McEnroe became a legend because he lived in that uncomfortable space. He was not the calm ideal of a champion. He was not the simple villain some critics wanted him to be. He was a genius with a scandalous temper, and the scandal was part of the reason people could not look away. His most famous sentence survived because it captured more than a line call. "You cannot be serious," was the cry of a player who could not accept that the world might be imperfect at the exact moment he needed perfection. That is dramatic. That is flawed. That is human. And maybe that is why, decades later, people still repeat it. Not because it was polite, not because it was noble, but because it was pure McEnroe. Brilliant, furious, theatrical, and impossible to forget. The final irony is that the thing many people remember first is not the thing that made him great. The tantrums made him famous beyond tennis. The talent made the tantrums matter. Without the genius, the anger would have been noise. Without the anger, the genius might have been admired more quietly. Together, they created one of the most complicated figures in sports. John McEnroe did not just play matches. He made every match feel unstable, like anything could happen on the next point. A perfect volley, a furious argument, a warning, a masterpiece. That was the bargain. You might hate what he did. You might love watching him do it. But either way, you watched. And that is why John McEnroe remains one of tennis's most fascinating champions. Not because he was easy to admire, but because he made admiration difficult. He forced the sport to confront the difference between greatness and good behavior. He showed that a champion can elevate a game and embarrass it in the same afternoon. If you remember only the shouting, you miss the artist. If you remember only the artist, you miss the cost. McEnroe's legacy is both, and that is exactly why it still holds. So here is the question. When you look back at McEnroe, do you see a genius who went too far, or a champion who showed tennis what pressure really looks like?